Good morning, Joseph, and welcome on board of the SDG Impact Stories. We're very happy to have you here. So you're CEO and co-founder of a responsible investing company called Goodvest. Could you tell us why you decided to start this company? Why does this topic matter today?
So most people ignore it, but today the impact of savers is 11 tons of CO2 per year, which represents more than their entire annual consumption and the equivalent of 10 Paris-New York flights, because our savings today are massively invested in harmful sectors such as fossil fuels, and people ignore it. So what we want to do with Goodvests is to democratize sustainable investing with the first Paris Agreement aligned investment app.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Joseph. It's true that the numbers are quite shocking, and it's great that you try to sensibilize other people about this. So, how do you see the market of responsible investing? Is it still young? Is it emerging? Are there more and more companies out there?
So it's pretty still young, even if we're talking about sustainable investing since a long time. Mm-hmm. I think COVID was a real game changer for sustainable investing. But we talk a lot about sustainable investing, but quite often there is still a lot of greenwashing. Mm-hmm. For instance, one of the main French labels is called label ISR. Yeah. And you've got today many funds that are labelized ISR and that have as first components companies such as Total. So we have a lot of work to do, and today on the market you have only 0.2% of the funds that are Paris Agreement aligned.
Okay, yeah. No, obviously I think it's an emerging market, and when there's a lot of demand and a lot of newness, there's a risk, this risk factor that many of them might not actually be responsible investing per se. So on the topic of these 17 SDGs and the Paris Agreement, what are your thoughts on the relationship between finance and the Paris Agreement or COP26? Like, what role would you say that the capital markets play in this global challenge that we're facing today? So
capital has a big role today. Finance really is building the world we are living in and the world we will live in the next years. We need to change the entire economy, and of course for that we need capital. We need to invest in sustainable energies, in sustainable transports, and finance and savers have a big role to play in that change.
Definitely. So we hear a lot about labels, notably you mentioned one, the ISR, which is the French label, Investissement Socialement Responsable. So what are your thoughts on these local and more international labels that are available? Are they trustworthy? Do you think we need more local ones, more international ones?
There is a kind of a jungle of labels today in France. Even in France, you've got a few labels. You've got 4 different labels. Okay. You've got ESR, you've got Greenfin, which is really about environmental. We also have the label Finansol, which is about solidarity. You also have the one which is called France Relance, that has been launched with the COVID to relaunch the French economy. Mm-hmm. You've got also Lux Flag. You've got many labels. I think you've got maybe 20 labels in Europe. In Europe, we are trying to unify a bit that with the taxonomy and so on. You've got the SFDR regulation, but that's still a bit a jungle. So I think that savers that are already a bit lost in investments in general, even when you don't talk about sustainable investments, need more pedagogy, and we need to simplify that if we want the finance to really evolve.
Yeah, so it's really a work in progress, I think. There's a lot, and it just has to be regulated and standardized.
Even, I'm going to tell you something, even the financial advisors in banks are really lost in this jungle. So imagine how can savers find their way.
Yeah, I mean, I think also the people who are up there, the ones managing, they didn't have the same education that we had on sustainability, because it didn't matter as much back then, so they just learned on the job.
There is a real lack of training in ESG, and the first master degrees in ESG are launching in Europe and in the US. So it's changing, but slowly.
Evolving. We're getting there, indeed. Are there any that you think have red flags that you don't agree with?
About the masters?
About the labels.
About the labels. So label ESR, I told you because it's a quite old one. Label Greenfin has also some limits. For instance, it's excluding nuclear energy. The problem is that today, if we cut nuclear energy, it is to go back to fossil fuels, and so it's not the right solution, I guess. Nuclear has a role to play in the transition of energy, I guess.
Yeah, it's all about transition, I think. So about the SFDR, could you maybe tell us more about it? Do you think it's a solution that we could apply maybe worldwide? Because for the moment it's just Europe.
Maybe. I think it's a good step. Today, I think it's much more easier to classify funds by numbers 6, 8, and 9. And 9 with more impact, and it's a big simplification, I guess, today, because in label ESR funds you have really good and really impact funds, and other ones that have a pretty low impact. So it's making it a bit easier.
Yeah, definitely. And also we had at COP26 the IFRS Foundation that is being undergoing now, so I think it's a good step forward to standardize. So I think today most of the investors who want to invest responsibly are very concerned about greenwashing, and the marketing is very powerful around it. So how would an individual know whether he's investing in something that might be greenwashing or not? Many of them are skeptical about the labels, as you just mentioned. Not
actually,
all
more than half of French people that know label ESR are skeptical about this label. So.
That's not great. So, yeah, how would you advise a skeptical potential investor to be more acquainted with them? How would they know how to differentiate a good label from another one, to see the red flags, to overall, ensure that their investment doesn't go into greenwashing?
I think one of the best thing is to ask questions. If you ask some question to your financial advisors, such as, okay, this fund is labeled ISR, but is there any fossil fuels? And if he cannot reply, that's not a good sign.
Okay.
So you have to look for transparency and ask the questions also. Ask the question about the strategy of the funds. Are they also voting when they can concerning decisions concerning environmental and social stuff? So you have many questions to ask, I guess, and try to look for transparency. Yeah.
So actually the investor kind of has to be a bit of an active investor today.
Yes, we can be a bit more technical, but when a fund is talking about CO2, you have to look if they are talking only about the direct emissions or also the indirect emission, like as a scope 3, and it's a big subject. Because for companies such as Total, the scope 3 is 85% of their carbon footprint. It is the same for cars. So you cannot only look the first two scopes.
Yeah, no, that's totally right. I think the scope 1 and 2 and 3 are really relevant. So it's great that the GHG protocol came up with that. Is there anything else that you see that really needs a big improvement so that we can move in the right way for the future? Anything shocking that you've seen that is going the wrong way, maybe?
So it's particular for the French market. It's not only about sustainable investing, but it's also about transparency of the fees also. That's a huge problem in France. Today, if you open a life insurance contract in France, you cannot transfer it.
Okay.
So your money is literally in a kind of jail of an insurer, but you can only close the contract and lose tax advantage, and you cannot transfer it as you can in all the other countries. And that's a big problem because so insurers don't need to change. They don't need to lower the fees. They don't need to be more transparent about ESG because they know that their consumers are stuck with their contracts. And I think if a life insurance contract were transferable, you have a lot of improvements in fees and also on ESG.
Okay, so there needs also political change.
Yes, I guess so.
Yeah. Okay, and so now if we look at Goodvest, what sets you apart from the other investing companies? where have you put the most efforts in order to become really trustworthy and have a transparent product?
So actually, the two main efforts we had were to have a scientific approach. So we partnered up with Carbon for Finance, which was co-founded by Jean-Marc Jancovici, and with them we are analyzing the three scopes. Today we are the only investment app in the European Union that is analyzing the three scopes to be sure that our portfolios are Paris Agreement aligned. And the second point is about transparency. We completely transparent about our methodology. If a consumer asks also the detail of the funds we are sending him, and I think it's really important to be transparent, so that you don't do greenwashing, because greenwashing is saying that you're green when you're not. When you're transparent, you can't do greenwashing. So that's an important point.
Yeah, so you're really taking also the initiative to educate your investors.
Yes, we have a podcast, we have a podcast, we have a blog, we do videos, interviews, and we try to make them learn about sustainable investing.
Yeah, and I think you've also you've selected some industries that you don't invest in at all.
Yes, we're excluding fossil fuels, so it can be. It can seem the minimum, but today you have really a few players that are excluding all fossil fuels, because it's classic to exclude it's classic to exclude coal, but you have really a few players that are also excluding gas, for instance.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, well, thank you so much, Joseph. This was really interesting. So I think what we can say is that in this transitory step towards getting into a more regulated system, environment, having labels, having the politics that go with it, I think we need to improve in all areas, right? Politics, regulations, labels. The investor itself has to become pretty active. You have your LinkedIn page also, which is pretty active. I think that's great. The podcast Monétique is available also on your website or Spotify. And this all together gives the transparency that the investors need today. In simple words, how does it work to invest at Goodvest?
So you can, for the moment, you can only invest if you live in France or if you're French. But you go on our website, goodvest.fr. You answer a few questions so that we can understand a bit your investor profile. We will measure your risk profile, the duration of your investments. We let you choose your themes, and then we create a personalized portfolio that matches both your investor profile and your values. Then you can modify it if you want, and if you want to continue, you just answer a few more questions. You download your ID and you electronically you sign the contract, and then you're invested, and you have access on the platform to many informations about your investments, about performance, but also about impact.
Yeah, I believe there's a simulation platform now on your website. Okay. So on the topic of impact, how do you ensure that the funds that you have really, how do you measure the impact that they have, and how can you tell then your investors that their money has done such and such
So we analyze the companies thanks to partners such as Carbon for Finance for the carbon footprints. So we analyze with them the carbon footprints of each companies on the three scopes, so direct and indirect emissions. We also exclude some harmful sectors such as fossil fuels, but also weapons, tobacco, adult entertainment, companies violating the global UN compact, and we let the customers choose their themes. So if you want to invest in solidarity, for instance, or if you want to invest in health, you can choose it when you onboard on the platform.
Okay. Do you have any last words about this topic?
Yes, I think that investors need to take responsibility about personal finance, so about the way they're managing their money. And I think in 2022, it's important to know where they invest their money and to choose also where they invest it.
Yeah, I think you're right on this. Nowadays, we can't really be a passive investor anymore. We have to act for change. So thank you so much, Joseph, for this very insightful interview. If you had to describe your company in 3 words, what would you say?
So I would say that at Goodvest we have a scientific and transparent approach, and that our approach is really ambitious. So So we want really to democratize sustainable investing for everyone. That's why we are also really accessible from 300 euro to as much as you want. And we have also a European edition.
Okay. I think those are the 3 main ingredients to have a good recipe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joseph.